Good morning. How y'all doing?
Good morning.
Ooh, I am one tired woman, so Sylvia inspires me thinking about leadership transition, something that I need to do. I have founded and left in place now 3 institutions over my career, starting and presently I work at Sister Song, and no, this is not an announcement that I'm stepping down yet. But it is certainly something that is on my mind more and more because I need new challenges, and this movement is about, believe me, this movement for reproductive justice should be centered on the people who are still fertile. You think? And so I'm excited about the nature of this conversations and the intersections that we're having. I wanted to look at another way of looking at this phrase, bringing the revolution home, and the revolutionaries as well, because for the last, 20 years of my life, I've been challenging those of us who are activists in the United States to really move away from that missionary paradigm where we're going overseas and we're fixing everybody else's problems while never challenging the imperialism and hegemonic processes of our own government. And that's pissed me off. Not only does it piss me off, but it pisses off all those people around the world who say, excuse me, we could fix ourselves if you would get your government out of our business. And part of what compels us, I think, to do the work of global work around the world, and I'm not dissing global work. Global work is fabulous. But what compels us is because we see so much unmet need out there that we feel that we could make a difference in addressing, and we know that we're stepping outside of the mainstream, marching to a different drummer when we do it, and all of that is wonderful. I just question, though, does it take place at the expense, and does it really allow us to avoid confronting the injustices that are in our own communities that, if we challenge, would make us a little too uncomfortable at home? In other words, I used to say when I did human rights education work, I'm willing to write any number of letters for any political prisoner, but I think it's ironic that we would step over a homeless man to mail it. And not notice that. There's something wrong with this picture. So when I think about bringing the revolution home, I'm really talking about at home, where you live, in your so-called safe community. Begin to interrogate what makes it safe. Does it lack people of color, undocumented people, homeless people? Why? I'll tell a real life story. Last week I was at the University of Texas doing a reproductive justice training and presentation, and it was an incredibly diverse set of kids. They were fabulous. Maybe about 150 of them came together for this. Then that night they asked me if I would go out to dinner with them, and I did. And they took me to this restaurant in Austin, Texas called Mother's. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of it, but yeah, except that when I walked into Mother's, which was tremendously crowded, I looked around, and I was the only black person in the restaurant. What's wrong with this picture? You just sat up here and had this whole training on working intersectionally across race, how we have to challenge power structures and all of this stuff, and you don't even notice that you're taking a black woman to an all-white restaurant? What the hell? Or more appropriately, what the fuck? And that's what I said. And they looked around and they said, but the food is good. And I said, no doubt it is for those of you who want to be in this environment. Sans anything that doesn't look like you. But for me, the food probably sucks because I feel very isolated. And context matters, you know. So anyway, that's a real story. We've been fighting those billboards. Sister Song, y'all know I'm with Sister Song, Women of Color Reproductive Justice Collective. We've been fighting those billboards across the country, claiming that black children are an endangered species. The worst place for an African American child is in the womb. Y'all seen the headlines and the mess that's going on. What it has caused us to do is really examine this critical place we are at in the reproductive justice movement. Because while we're on the front lines fighting against these billboards, as women of color, African American and Asian Pacific Islander women are the immediate targets of the billboard campaign, but we know it's going to migrate because it went to Arizona, targeting Latina women, it's going to reservations and indigenous communities, targeting them. It's amazing how our opponents are more culturally competent than our allies in some kinds of ways, you know, because they're really drilling down and targeting in very sophisticated ways. And so it raises, why are we at this critical place in the RJ movement? I think that as women of color, we have had a lot of success in getting the RJ framework embraced and propagated, and the human rights framework that underlies the RJ framework. We hear more and more organizations reinvent themselves as human rights organizations, Center for Reproductive Rights, on and on. I mean, we love that. But at the same time, we have to question, how deeply do you mean it? How deep? This is not just an image makeover, people. If you can fight for abortion rights and you don't even intersectionalize that fight so that you care as deeply about the abortion rights of women who are incarcerated as you do about women who can't purchase private insurance, fuck you. Because you are not getting it. It's not about working on all the issues all the time. Even if you focus on one issue, you have to do it in an intersectional way. You know, you can't leave people out for your convenience, or it might make you uncomfortable at home or in Congress to talk about these people that they usually lop off when it comes to a policy fight. You know, well, we don't really want to talk about the abortion rights or the reproductive health needs of women who are drug abusing or who are incarcerated, because we want to do the poster child of the, you know, straight white mother with 2 kids who's being denied insurance coverage for abortion. So we're at that critical moment in our movement of whether or not we mean the rhetoric that we are preaching. And particularly if you're going to pimp the reproductive justice framework, expect us to call you on it for not getting it right. I mean, that's just not going to happen. I think the main thing that stands in the way of us getting it right, though, is that what has happened with the billboards and this whole black genocide campaign and stuff is that our opponents have figured out some strong and very obvious weaknesses in our movement. And probably the single one that I would talk about today is our inability to truly deal with the issue of racism and white supremacy in our movement. And because of that, they're driving a Mack truck through that, onto that sore toe. You know, so every time they twin the conversation of race and abortion, we have our leading feminist organizations stuttering because they don't know how to address it. You know, after 90 years, and I'm sorry to call Planned Parenthood out. No, I'm not. I'm not sorry to call them out. You've had 90 years to message on Margaret Sanger. What the hell? Why would, you know, we as black women did it in a night. When the billboards went up, you know, so what's going on here? Can we bring the revolution home? And so I'll close by saying a couple of things. First of all, I think that we're at a crucial juncture where the leadership of women of color is not only the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do. And that is something that people are going to have to accustom themselves to looking at and seeing in a whole new way. And just because I'm talking about the leadership of women of color, that doesn't mean we want to transform our social habits and hang out with you late at night at these all-white restaurants so we can discuss strategy. Okay? That ain't how that's going to happen. Okay? At the same time, we have to push back on a simplistic interpretation of what we mean by the leadership of women of color. Because I was in Texas a couple of weeks ago doing another training, and this white woman, who's obviously an ally, said, well, when the billboards came, I didn't know whether I should speak up because I'm not a woman of color. And I had to say to her in as gentle a way as I could, I would expect any ally and any progressive to speak up against racism and any form of injustice, whoever is standing around you at the time. And your inability to speak up may speak to how shallowly held your values are. That you have to have a victim of injustice in order to embolden yourself to speak up so that you look good to them? What is that about? If you cannot challenge injustice in your safe and comfortable spaces, you're not really being an effective ally. Because you'll be in those safe and comfortable spaces I may never have access to. And so when I say respect the leadership of women of color, I'm not saying that you then put your own need for leadership in the back seat and only pull it out when it's convenient for you. You need to pull it out to have the difficult conversations all the time. So we need to stand up for justice all the time, particularly given that we are privileged to speak for the women whose voices often can't be heard. I've never been incarcerated, but I'm compelled to speak up for incarcerated women because I know that I'm privileged to be in a space where their voices may never be heard. I'm not undocumented, so I can go to an immigrant rights rally and get in the cop's face because I know I have privilege that protects me that an undocumented person would not have, and we are obligated to use that privilege. I think I heard a clip of the wonderful phrase. Marlene, you might have said this, I don't know, but it said, we as Americans, we are expert at complaining about our oppressions. What we're not good at is being accountable for our privileges. And, so we need to do that. And finally, I think that to bring the revolution home, we're going to have to build a human rights movement in this country. Y'all have heard me say this for the last 20 years, maybe even longer. I think that it's going to happen, though. What I really like about the human rights framework is that it's such a natural framework for young people who live life in a very intersectional, non-siloed, non-boundary kind of way. They look at the boundaries that we of the older generations have, and they say, will you get over yourself? I am not just a woman. I am not just queer. I am not just a college student. I am not just caring about the environment. I'm not just this. I am all of those things at the same damn time and get over it, And so I think it's a natural for us to use the human rights framework in its properly intersectional way as a way of bringing the revolution home and tying it to my first speech to do that social justice and human rights work that not only makes a difference to our lives, but makes a difference around the world. Literally around the world. Oh, Lord, a picture of Obama popped in my head. I don't even want to go there. That's a whole nother speech. So let me close by inviting all of y'all to join Sister Song at our next national conference, which is called Let's Talk About Sex. All right. It's going to be July 14th through 17th in Miami on South Beach. Sex on the beach is a good idea. And for those of you who don't drink, it'll be masturbation on the beach. But, we're going to work it out, and we'd love to see all of y'all there. But the reality is that no matter how much fun we have doing this work, The lives we save really matter, and maybe the lives we save that matter the most to us is our own. But the reality is that bringing the revolution home is more than just a phrase. It has to be a philosophy, it has to be a practice, and it has to involve taking risks. Because when you're trying to create a revolution, you're going to mess up over and over and over again. But you have to be brave enough to take that risk so that you can create that change and come back and try it again the next time. I think, who was it that said, if you coalition work, you can't do that from home, and if you want to be safe, stay home. Was that Audrey? I think it's Bernice Reagan. Bernice Reagan, that's right, Bernice Reagan. Bernice said that. And that's where we are. If we're going to bring the revolution home, we have to admit that we are not about creating safety, we're about creating change. Thank you. Yeah.